Okay, so let's take a look at how you can create the SQL Server on virtual machine. So let's take a look at our Azure portal. You can create a resource, or alternatively you can browse the services. So here within database category, we will take a look at SQL virtual machines, right? So within that, currently we have no SQL virtual machine to run, right? So we click on create and it will take us to setup form. Here you can see before that we will have to select a plan to use the service. We don't need manage instance, we don't need SQL database, so we need SQL virtual machine. So we will pick the image before we can create anything. So let's click on the image drop down, and here we select free SQL Server license on Windows Server 2022. Similarly, there are other versions as well, right? For example, there is SQL Server 2019 developer on Windows Server and previous version as well. There are enterprise, standard, and web too, but we will stick with free license. So we will select free SQL Server license on Windows 22, right? So in near future you could be seeing different versions, so try and experiment with those, right? Click create. Now here we will be seeing the things like subscription, then resource group, choose training, your subscription, and virtual machine name. Let's name this something like SQL VM server, right? Then we pick the region. Let's say we pick the region native to us. So currently I don't have any native region here based on that, but central India is closest I can go. Now the next is using infrastructure redundancy, so we choose available zone, then we pick zone 1, then security type we choose the standard one, right? We already picked the image free SQL Server license on SQL Server Developer Edition for Windows Server, right? Now here I can also pick the size. For example, there is 4 CPU 16 GB memory or 2 CPU 8 GB memory, so this seems to be the only one that I can run. Now comes the username. So let's see, I pick the administrator account name as my name, then we will pick the password, add the password, and once accepted we move on to inbound port rules. Here you see we choose the public inbound port rules as HTTP, HTTPS. If you want SSH you can do so. I will leave the SSH out because we connect using RDP, right? Now next we choose disks. Whenever we create virtual machine, we also have an option to pick the disks. Here encryption would be locked because it is not registered for subscription, which is free. Now I will pick the standard HDD so that cost will be lower. Then I can delete this entire setup with VM, so enable that. Then key management, I can pick platform managed. That's the only option I have. Now if we explore advanced, options are locked because we are letting the platform to manage our disk and encryption, right? So next is networking. So here let's say I picked my virtual network, which is just created for this purpose. Then comes subnet, and finally IP. All of that is created here. NIC setup is basic. Public ports, we selected them. Then delete public IPs and NIC when a VM is deleted. There is also load balancing option, but considering that we are doing the test, I don't think we need this, right? So click management, so we can see the subscription here, protected under Defender Cloud Basic Plan. Now identity we haven't selected, no Azure Active Directory either. You can auto shut down, right? So that we can check uncheck. Then there are guest OS updates, you can enable disable them. Okay, now apart from OS updates and patches, you can even set everything to right. So I am setting everything to manual updates, and from there we can move to monitoring part. Here you can enable the alerts, enable the diagnostic at boot, right, and then click advanced. Now here you see you have extension to add install if you want, so that it will be loaded when your server runs. You can also customize the with custom data and so on, right? So next thing we will go is moving to SQL Server settings, where you can see SQL connectivity. We can choose inside VM or private or public, right? So you can choose public so that it will be accessible from every port, right? Next we can enable SQL authentication. So here you can read for connecting with SQL Server. You can choose your login name, password. Then there is also Azure Key Vault integration. I don't have it set up, so I'm leaving that. Now here you see SQL data 1 GB, sorry 1 TB, and other limits are specified for storage, right? Apart from that, you have SQL Server license you can apply for. Currently we are on developer, so no need to worry about that, right? There is also R services and automatic backup option you can enable, right? So you can read through all of this, the default configuration that we have and the changes you can make. Click tags, and within tags you can organize things. Then comes review and create. Right, so we can validate with all the available options that we have, right? So once we do that, we will click on our virtual machine, right? So that would basically allow us to start with the help of RDP on our desktop as well. So we will be able to access deployed machine, right? So let's click on create and let it deploy so that we can move further. Right, so let this deploy. Now that deployment is complete, I can go to resource with the single click, and here we have our SQL virtual machine and its IP address, right? We also have our own virtual network for this particular VM, right? Now we can just open RDP and we can confirm that everything is working. So open the RDP. Now here let me copy the IP address and paste it. Click connect. And then it will ask me for my username and password. Now let's click OK. Accept the certificate and let it boot up. It will install few modules, considering we are setting up our SQL Server Developer Edition. So it will install few modules as well, and it will continue booting. Now let me check, and here you see our server manager, right? We can close the pop-ups that appear. Now you see our service running and it is showing server manager dashboard here. I can also verify other options. Here you see SQL Server is here. We can check everything here. So we need SQL Server Management Studio to work while we are using this in RDP. But apart from that, everything just works. You can set up IIS and other things and get your SQL Server running. So we have shown you how to create the SQL virtual machine and how to connect to it using RDP as well.